Hey everybody, I'm John Reffett and welcome back to the shop. The rod build video is getting a little long, so I'm going to split this up, maybe even into 3 parts. But we did our handle, we found the spine. Now we're going to start with the guide placement and doing some guide wraps. So let's get right into it. Okay, so we got set up here on the first guide. Now on this one, you want to make sure that on the double foot part of it, where you got the double brace, goes towards the handle. So I'm gonna guess we'll just get started here. Slide the foot up under the tubing. Just like so. Now, I'll just go ahead and get my measuring tape. Measure from the end down to our first one was 34 3/4. So that would be, you're going to measure right to the ring. So we need to come back up a little bit. Just slide it up till your ring is right there at 34 3/4. Okay. So now that you have that there, and you want to, make sure it's right with the blank. You don't want it crooked. And what I'll do then is I'll take the rod off of the rack, and I usually eyeball these guides. I found it better. They make a tool that has a laser on it that fits into the reel seat, but it never comes out right. It just seems like every time that I do it with the eye, it's so much better. So, turn your reel seat straight up. You can get fairly close right here. So I will pull this off the blank, eyeball it, and then we'll start the wrap. Okay, so the next thing that I try to do here is I'll take a piece of this just 1/4 inch masking tape. Now you can start your thread however you want to here. Some will go 1/8, some will go 1/4. If you're doing some sort of inlay, you might want to go a little bit more. I generally go about 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 to 1/4. So we'll start this one, and the only reason I put this tape here, it gives me a starting point, and also something to bunch the thread right up against as you're starting. You don't have to do this. Just something I've started doing and got in the habit of doing it. And then just kind of turn it around and make sure that it gives you a good straight edge to start with. So this customer wanted, I believe this is redfish color, red. So we'll get our thread strung through the hand wrapper here. And what this does is just a tension device is all it is. You don't want it, you want it to where it's just going to just roll off of it as you wrap. So get your tension about right. I'll start one wrap around. Hold your finger on it. Now it's going to be a little bit hard to see, and you'll cross that running thread over your first wrap. And then wrap 2 or 3 times. And take your burnishing tool we talked about in the other video and pack your threads. You want them nice and tight. You don't want any gaps in there. There is a way to fix that if you do get some gaps. So that's all that tape does, is give you a good starting point and a place to run your thread again. So I'll wrap it over a few more times and cut this tag end off. That's where your razor blade or your X-Acto knife comes in handy. So you can lay the blade, let me turn this a little bit more so you can see. Lay the blade flat on the thread and then pull your running thread over and just put pressure, light pressure, until it cuts. And then you can continue with your wrap. Now you kind of want your running thread coming off the spool, a little bit at an angle towards the rear of that, and that will keep it good and tight. But you just kind of wrap ever so slowly as you go. And then when you get close to the guide, you may want to slow down a little bit. Sometimes you'll have to help the thread up the guide foot, but that's where it comes in handy if you've got a nice little ramp for it right here. So that's why I say always use a file and go ahead and touch them up just a little bit. Because as you can see how it makes a nice transition. There's no gaps or anything, and it just runs right up the guide foot. And if you do see a little gap, just take the edge of your burnishing tool and push against the thread and keep it nice and packed. Kind of simple. And then just continue your wrap right on up the guide foot. And it'll go fairly quick. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Now as you get closer, excuse me, once we get to the end of the wrap, we're going to have to pull this thread underneath the existing wraps. So an easy way to do that, they make a tool for this, but I'll just take a piece of thread. We'll just take a piece of black, cut this off a piece 8 or 10 inches long, fold it in half, just like so. Now keep in mind, since we're going this way, we want to pull it back up underneath underneath the existing thread, so our loop will be facing towards the tip of the rod. Slide it up under that one single thread on your wrap, and then just continue to wrap around. Now watch, because sometimes you can get some gaps, but this one's staying fairly tight. So we'll wrap all the way up to the edge of the guide foot. And now, so we've got it all the way to the edge as far as we want. You don't want to wrap up this brace part of the guide here, because it'll cause a big mess. So, and then put your finger on that running thread that's coming off of your spool. Hold it here, a little slack in it, so now you've got tension held against that. And cut off a pretty good section. You're going to waste a little bit, but it's not really going to matter. Take your running thread through that loop, pull it tight. Now, pull your loop snug up against your thread that's already there. Okay, it's not going to go anywhere now. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You can pull the thread completely through to where your tag end will be sticking out where the black thread is. I'll do it that way first, and then on the next one I'll show you the way that I prefer to do it. This is pretty simple this way. So just easily pull, comes all the way through. So now, as you can see where that thread, so we got to cut it off. Now some guys will just lay it through and cut like we did in the first, when we first started the wrap. I don't like to do that because sometimes it leaves a little knot, little piece of thread. So I will pull it back. You see that gap? Now you have to be careful with this. You do not want to gouge the guide, or the blank, I'm sorry. So put your knife there right close to the thread and just pull up on this tag end. It'll cut right off. So now you can take your burnishing tool and just push everything right back together and make a nice straight edge. You might have to just poke around on it a little bit to get it good and straight. Then kind of turn the rod and see how it looks. Straighten everything up real nice. And there you have it. You've wrapped one side of your guide. So you can pull this tape off. And you've got a nice straight edge in the front. So now take your burnishing tool, and if you do get a gap, a very small gap here, you can take this thread will actually kind of mash down and expand. I like to do that anyway to get any gaps. Sometimes the thread's a little thicker or thinner in places. doesn't happen very often. But you can kind of just lightly put some pressure on it and it will smooth right out. You gotta be careful, sometimes your thread might come loose on you, but just pack it right back up. And then once you get the epoxy on there, it will not move. A little bit of a place right there. That looks pretty good right there. So you've wrapped one guide foot. So we'll move on to the next piece here. Now you can go ahead and take this tubing off because it will not move on these. The double guide foots are just, you can cut it off, throw it away. I like to save it on there just in case you happen to be wrapping this thing and something goes bad on you. So if you leave it out here and you have to cut all your existing wrap off, you can start over, slide that back down, put your guide foot under it, start again. So take our piece of tape. We start roughly an 1/8 inch. So from the tip of the guide foot to the tape, 1/8 inch. Now wrap it straight around. Sometimes you may have to adjust a little. Our thread straightened out. Now we'll start a wrap again. Like I said, I go around one time. You can go around more if you choose. A couple times. I think a lot of people do that, and then it'll cross the thread over. So get that there, put your finger on it, hopefully you can see that, and then just jump that running thread right over top of the thread that you just put on. Now you kind of have to hold a little tension on it. It will tend to slide. And one thing I forgot to mention, this tag end, make sure that as you're wrapping towards the center of your guide, that thread is staying underneath of that, because that clamps that thing down. It'll clamp that thread down. So a couple, 3 wraps. We'll tighten up a little bit. If you do get a little loose, you can pull that tag in, kind of tighten it up some. Let's go a few more. Cut our tag end off. Here again, just lay the blade. You don't want to just take it and just cut down into it, because you could gouge that blank, and like I said before, it's a potential breaking point down the road. So lay that flat against it, pull your tag end off, and then continue your wrap. Get a little bit of an angle back towards the tip on this one, since we're wrapping the opposite direction here. And just wrap your way up. See how again we're getting a good transition right here, so we don't have any gaps. It just slides right up the guide foot. Keep on going here. I'm going to stop a little further back on this one, because I'm going to show you a different way to pull the thread up underneath of it, where you don't have to pull back, have a gap, and then cut that down. So we'll take our pull through here. Now remember, we're going the opposite direction, so our loop has to be opposite from the first one. Try to get all your twist out of that thing. Slide up under and continue your wrap. We'll take it. Now see, I'm getting too much of an angle, so the thread kind of jumped on the existing thread. And if you get a little gap, you can also take your fingernail and just kind of slide it back a little bit and pack your thread. So we'll go on up to about there. We'll put our finger here, hold tension, we'll slack. Cut your thread, leave yourself plenty to pull on. Now, there you have that. Now, pull your pull through back just to where it's snug. Okay. Once it holds tension against that, it won't go anywhere. So now, take your X-Acto knife or your razor blade, lay right against it, and go ahead and cut that tag in right there. Now when you pull, you kind of want to pull back across the blank. And that happens sometimes. I didn't get it quite enough, so it's a good thing so we'll just start over. It's good that happened to show you. It will happen from time to time. But it's no big deal. We can just take off our thread here. We'll start again. So, grab our thread. Try not to make this video too long. You don't want to hear me ramble on and watch me mess up. But kind of shows you what can happen. And that's what I was saying about keeping your piece of tubing here. It's like a little piece of surgical tubing in case this happens. So we'll do one wrap, run our thread over, cross it over. Just a couple of wraps here. Push everything back. Tight against the tape. A lot of people I don't think use the tape, but it's a nice easy starting point. This takes a second to do. A few more wraps and then we'll cut the tag end. Now wrap right up the guide foot, just like we did before. Right up. See, it jumped over, so kind of got to be careful. Sometimes you'll get just a little bit of you can see a little bit of bow right there. Just push it back. That'll allow your thread to continue to move. I think what I did before, I just didn't leave enough space here. So we'll stop it a little further back than we normally would. You can kind of see we'll go up to about where that guide foot, you can see it's got a little wide spot right there. We'll kind of stop about right there. So we'll slide our pull through up under and continue wrapping. Okay, one more, that'll do it. You can see we got some gaps, but we'll burnish it again, close those gaps up. So finger on the running thread, slack. Now run that through your loop. Hold tension. Pull it up tight. Just to where it almost starts to disappear. Now let's try this again. So we got a little bit of a tag right there. But as we pull, remember we'll pull back across the blank. There we go. Like, it leaves a nice clean edge. Close up these gaps here a little bit and straighten up. Might have went just a tad too far. There we go. Take your tape off. Now take the flat edge of our burnishing tool and flatten it all out. So there we go. So now we've wrapped our first guide. So it's basically the same thing all the way through. A single foot guide. Of course, naturally you want to have one wrap. you do it the same way. See if I can slide this down where you can see. And you'll just slide it right up under your next piece of tubing. Just like that. And measure. Center your guide. Remember, you're going right to the guide frame. And start your wrap again. There's a whole lot of different things you can do to the wraps. You can do inlays. You can do take some silver and make an accent. I'm not going to do it on this one, but it's really simple to do. Maybe some other videos we'll get to that. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap the rest of these up. And once we get down to the tip top, I usually like to wrap a little bit on the edge of that. But like I say, you can do anything you want to do here with these in any color. It's just possibilities are endless. And even on your guides, as you're using these measurements, and if you want less guides, you can use less guides, but be careful because you'll change the deflection of your rod. But like I say, the possibilities are endless, and you can do whatever you want to do with this. So we'll get these wrapped up and come right back. Okay, so we've got all of our guides wrapped. One thing I want to mention, now while these are wrapped like this, you can still move them. So you want to check a couple of times, make sure you got everything lined up just like you want it. Because once you do the epoxy, you're going to have to cut it off to move it. So double check that a couple of times. Make sure you've got all your guides just exactly where you want. So now it's time to do our tip top. So what you'll need is tip top guide, your adhesive. And I got a video on how to cut one off and put a new one on. So once you get the adhesive, it's just a glue stick. You just want to heat it up. And then kind of just smear it off the edge. It doesn't take a whole lot to hold these on. Let it cool a little bit, and you can kind of just pull it off and roll it around. Kind of get a little sliver like that. I've already got some in here, but you just insert it in. If you get a little much, just trim it back. So, no more than that. I like to hold this with some tweezers, so as you heat this back up, sucker gets a little warm. So take your lighter. Don't put the flame right against it, just enough to heat it up. And as it heats up, you'll see it start to bubble in the end a little bit. So you see it come out. So slide it on and twist as you go around, kind of just like we did when we did our handle. Slide all the way down to your mark. So you can see we've got it all on, and it will set pretty quick on you. So as you can tell, I mean, we're way off here, but we can just heat it right back up. Turn it just a little more and get everything lined up just right. So there we're pretty close. So we'll pull it back off. We'll eyeball everything again and get it all lined up. Move our tip top if need to. Now I usually take a little bit of whatever color thread, and I'll wrap a little bit here, about the same length as your last guide. Or you can leave it blank, or leave it without thread, however you choose to do it. So we'll get this all lined up and everything ready for epoxy. When we come back, we'll do a little bit on the epoxy and show you how to do that. Okay, so in this one we got all of our guides placed. We got them wrapped. We're going to have to call it quits here. Call this part number 2. We'll do a third one, and we'll try to finish up with the last coat of epoxy. Get our hook keeper on, get our decals on, and call this a build. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.